Welcome. My name is Kelly Anderson, and this is Fanimated, the animation fan podcast where we get a chance to geek out about our favorite animated media. This week, I am joined by Laura Wacker-Hansen and Kate Callen to discuss the 2013 Disney animated film, Frozen. We had such a blast diving into the characters, production, and cultural impact of this film that not everything we discussed made it into this final episode. If you want to hear more about Idina Menzel, the costumes of Frozen, and some other funny banter, we have a bonus Frozen episode on our Patreon page for anyone who donates $1 or more. That's patreon.com/Fanimated. Be sure to check that out if you enjoyed this episode. We still have a lot to dig into here, so spoiler warning for those who haven't seen Frozen, and let's get started and let's get animated. Kate and Laura are here with me to discuss Frozen. How are you guys doing?
Yay, Frozen!
We're so good.
Yay.
All the girls talking about the ultimate modern girl Disney movie.
Okay, you don't need us to tell you how great Frozen is. It is
the
most successful Disney. It is the most. Well, now it's the second most, but
what's the second? What's the first?
The Lion King remake.
Ew, no! Boo!
Okay, to be fair, Kate and I haven't seen it, but we have
CGI remake.
Oh man, well, okay, really briefly, because the three of us last time we talked about The Lion King, so everyone go listen to that episode. Then we talked about like what we were thinking about the remake and everything. Yeah, no, it wasn't great. It was definitely cool, like the animation, like, wow, look how far animation has come. And, you know, most of the actors, they did fine. It was great, like, whatever. But also, if I'm going to watch The Lion King, I'm just going to watch the original.
Right.
But it did really well for Disney, so money talks.
Well, good for Disney. They're suffering, so, you know, they needed another hit really bad.
Yeah, of course they did. But at the time, Frozen was the highest grossing animated film. Mm-hmm. And now it is number 2, which is fine.
Wow.
So we don't need to tell you why it's so great, but we're going to do it anyway. And just in case you've lived under a rock for the past 6 years, the basic storyline is that there are 2 sisters who are princesses. Elsa is about to become queen, and she has magical powers that can create ice and snow. And Anna is her wacky, clumsy, funny younger sister, and goes on a quest to save Elsa from herself. It came out in 2013, and I cannot believe that is that long ago already. I don't know if you guys are aware, but I was absolutely obsessed with everything about this film, like up until its release. Like I remember this. You remember. I was tracking this film like it was my
hardcore.
Anything that got like dropped into the internet, I was there. All right. I was reading everything. I was like, what concept art has been being leaked now? Like I was like so pumped for this film. This is the experience that made me not do that anymore, because as fun as it is to follow a film like that, by the time I got, you know, opening night when I saw it in theaters with a whole bunch of 4-year-olds, I was disappointed because my expectations had gotten so abnormally high. But I will say time has healed that, and I enjoy it so much more now.
So when I first saw Frozen, this was the first time that we've talked about a film that we all got to see in the theater. So go us. But I did the opposite. I was a graduate student at the time living in Chicago by myself. interning like 10 hours a day every day and then going to business school at night. And so I did not have a life, and my family came to visit me. My mom and my younger sister and my brother, who was very young at the time, he was in 5th grade. And so they were visiting, and it was cold, and we needed something to do. And I lived in this little part of Chicago called Oak Park. And they had a really old-fashioned downtown with a little movie theater that you bought the tickets outside the movie theater and went in. Really cute. And so I just said, well, let's go down. This new Disney movie's out. It's called Frozen. It's supposed to be pretty good. So let's go see it. And I went in knowing nothing about it, with no expectations, just thinking it was something I liked Disney movies and my little brother would like it, and came out of the movie theater completely blown away. I really liked, because Garrett and I saw Tangled in the theater. We saw The Frog Princess in the theater. We saw all those kind of later ones in the theater, and I thoroughly enjoyed them, but I just was not prepared for how wonderful Frozen was when I went in to see it, which made it really, really cool. It was a very nostalgic film, with also at the same time being very new. So everything about, the animation was completely new and just knocked your socks off. The storyline had a lot of very kind of millennial modern themes in it, but at the same time I felt like they had harkened back to so many of the things that made their movies successful when I was a child, and I saw a lot of those themes coming back in the film. So I just completely thoroughly enjoyed it. And then I had 2 nieces who kind of ruined it for a little bit, and I liked it again.
Yeah, if you're around any children, even now, like I know kids who are still obsessed and are, watching it 5 times a day. So that can be hard to like any film.
Particularly with Frozen, the marketing of that movie was just so completely like insanely saturated. Like you couldn't, for like, even now you really can't go anywhere without seeing, like you can't go to Target without seeing Frozen plastered somewhere.
Right.
It got to the point where it was just like, oh, I'm so sick of seeing this. Like, do I even like this movie anymore? It's just everywhere, and I need it to stop.
So Kate and I kind of talked about this when we were watching it. And I think the big difference, and one of the reasons that it was like, why is this still happening, was Disney rode the Frozen coattails for so long.
Yes.
Kelly, you may have other things you want to pepper in or disagree with me, but as a more shall I say, casual consumer of animation than yourself and some of your listeners, I felt like Disney really didn't have another movie that affected pop culture the way that Frozen did until Moana came out. And that was a big period. And we were used to, when we were children, and it was kind of what I call the golden age, right? Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, Aladdin. They came out boom, boom, boom. Like every single year, there was another Disney movie with all the toys and the Halloween costumes and the birthday party plates and cakes. And every year it was a new one that you got to be obsessed with. And Frozen came out, and then it was just Frozen, and they like shoved Frozen in our face until they could get Moana out to us.
Yeah.
And that was kind of, I think, one of the reasons that we got such intense like Frozen overkill.
Definitely, because I'm looking here, and honestly, like Big Hero 6, Inside Out, Zootopia, Finding Dory were kind of in that in-between time after Frozen, before Moana. I definitely had big impacts at the time, but nothing that lasted as long as Frozen.
Well, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I felt like in my head, again, as a like casual taker-inner of animation and Disney, I felt like all of those movies you just listed in my head were Pixar movies. That was like, and it, to me, they just live in a very different world than what I consider to be like the Disney princess movies, right?
Yeah.
They're
Absolutely.
less musical. The storylines are very different. It's the Disney princess model. And I hate to call it that because it one of the things that makes the traditional Disney princess model work is that it's not just about one character or one gender of a character. There are always multiple animal characters. There are multiple male characters. There are lots of side characters. There's usually some type of, magic thing happening, but I just kind of group them into because they're the princess movies, because there's usually a princess. And as a girl, I always like the princess in the movie. But I think that that was one of the things that was interesting with Frozen, was when they finally got back to that formulation that was their bread and butter, when Disney created all of us, the crazy adults who still go to Disney World, which was a new phenomenon. Our parents didn't do that. They took us there because we were kids.
Right.
And I think that they finally, and that was one of the neat things, was that Frozen was a movie that had enough nostalgia that it was really special for the adults that liked it, but it was also something that was able to introduce children to the genre of Disney. I think one of the things, and we will definitely have a little section where we will talk about the music, is that it was a musical. Disney got into this habit, and the Pixar movies especially, where they were animated movies with really great music. But they started, it was sometimes just one music artist that, recorded all of the songs for it. And it had a really great soundtrack, and maybe there was a singing character here or there, but they weren't what I would consider a musical. And Frozen really brought back as a triumph the musical. I know that Tangled was a musical as well, but I personally think that Tangled was actually a film that was for older people. It really wasn't a children's movie, in the sense that Frozen can be a little bit of a disappointment to adults, because it is unapologetically a children's movie, even though
it has
adults really
an
like
Olaf.
Yeah, and it has the
We
trolls.
love an Olaf.
Olaf is like just everything. I adore Olaf. Olaf brought back the sidekick in a way that the sidekicks of some of the ones, the sidekicks they tried to create in like Princess and the Frog, even the little cute one in Tangled.
He's my fave.
Pascal, that's his name, which is the cutest name. But they did not have the impact that a lot of the sidekicks had in the previous movies. Yeah. So, when you think of Abu, it's usually the animals. It was a really important part of making those movies something that everyone really liked, because like my sister was not a princess girl. She was an animal girl. She always liked animals, and her favorite was always the animals. So when we would have our birthday parties, my birthday was in October, hers was in November, and we'd always have the same movie theme, but they were hugely different. So the year that I had a Pocahontas party, I had Pocahontas on my cake and had Miko on her cake, because she loved Miko, and Flipped because she loved animals. And I think that Frozen rebalanced all of those characters with that very like traditional successful Disney balance, where if you liked animals, if you were a boy or you were a girl who liked boy characters, you had one of those. Anna was a little bit more of a feisty girl. Elsa was the very pretty princess. You had the crazy old guy, the Duke of Westleton, who was always my older brother's favorite character when we were little. He loved the old guys. You had the villain. It was, they were all there in a way that they just hadn't been for a very long time.
Yes. And you just keep making the greatest point of like referring back to the Disney Renaissance era of The Little Mermaid, of Pocahontas, of all of these phenomenal films. And honestly, I think that's what, Tangled tried and started us getting there, but Frozen is, I think, when this current age of Disney, whatever that age is, really kicked off. Because I agree, it so encompasses and really hits the nail on the head of Disney's phenomenal formula and alternating, just adjusting it slightly for our current times and for our current technologies. That all just leads into what all of these films have in common, honestly, is that Frozen, you can track Frozen's development all the way back to Walt Disney himself. They were in talks to make a film about Hans Christian Andersen, and it would actually be partially live action about his life, while Walt Disney Studios would animate his stories and his characters into this film. So they had a lot of ideas and things for all of these stories, and honestly, that's where all of these movies come from, is that they had been looking at the Hans Christian Andersen stories for so long. And Frozen, it just took a really, really long time to get there, and that's for a reason. It's based off of the story The Snow Queen.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually still called The Snow Queen, but the biggest problem they had with that story and why it took so long to develop, because even in the early 2000s they tried to get this film running, but every single time they tried, they couldn't get the character of the Snow Queen to stick. Like, they couldn't find a way to make it relatable and getting audiences to connect every single time they would try. And honestly, even when Frozen got further and further into development, what's so cool about this film is that it had so many changes up until like months before the story came out. But one of the biggest breakthroughs was the song Let It Go. Like,
I'm sure. When
they wrote that song, they rewrote a ton of the script because they were like, that's it. That they were able to find that relatability in the Snow Queen. Mm-hmm. That was the missing piece that they had been missing all along.
Well, and that song has just turned into such an anthem for people who feel other, whether it's in regards to a whole myriad of things. And yeah, that makes all the sense in the world, that song is kind of the key to, like, it's almost kind of, I feel like it's kind of the crux of the movie in a way. That's just her, like, power ballad about, like, here I am and this is me and I finally get to live in the way that I am meant to. And that's just like a big old chunk of the puzzle.
The beauty of Frozen is it took them a really long time to arrive at a very simple storyline, that in order to truly be yourself, you have to be yourself, but you also can't be by yourself. You need other people. And it's just that classic kind of like love thing, you need to love yourself but you need to love other people also. And there are other little pieces peppered in of how you achieve that, the relationship with the sisters. But at the end of the day, it's a very like small little self-discovery story. And it's something that kids really need to understand, right? Controlling your emotions. Hiding your emotions is not good, but you have to control your emotions. Right. It's not hiding, but it's control. And that's like, that sounds like something Mr. Rogers would have taught you, right? It's very simple, but it's something that children really need to absorb. And it's something that adults struggle to remember and to do themselves, let alone teach children. And that's why it was so great.
And it's not even control. It's about not letting fear control you.
Yes.
It's really, really phenomenal that, of course, the song that is in everyone's head when they think of Frozen and that's so successful is the one that like changed the story for them. Because before that, Elsa was the villain, period. And after that, Elsa was just scared and struggling to control something that, she didn't ask for.
Because the original Snow Queen story, she is the villain.
It was kind of funny. The one thing, when I said I went into Frozen with no expectations, I did know that it was kind of like a Snow Queen story. And I had, when I was little, my grandmother used to buy us the like 50-cent VHSs at the grocery store all the time. And we had this really cheap animated Snow Queen story. I think it was like 45 minutes long. She bought it for my sister, I think. And it was just one of the I don't even know how we had it, but every now and again we'd put it on. My sister would want to watch it. And it was so weird and scary, and there was like an ice crystal in someone's eye, and he was evil, and the kids, and but the ice crystals like what made him evil, and they had to get it out. And it was like very biblical, but very creepy at the same time. And she was really, really pretty and lived in this castle of ice, and she was so pretty, but she was so evil, and it was super scary. And so that was. And it was animated, but it was this horrible animation that I loved as a child. And then I went, like, when you watch it as an adult, you're like, this is like stop motion, like paintings that they're just moving in front of the screen really fast. So, I mean, let's just say Frozen was a big upgrade from the Snow Queen that I watched when I was little.
Oh, yeah. Well, and speaking of how much the animation has changed. Now, I have a little bit of frustration with the animation in some respect, but let me tell you about all the awesome stuff first. Okay, so Frozen, obviously they put a ton of hours into creating tons of new systems just to make everything work, and to mostly for snow. And what's interesting is someone was trying to describe it as like snow is not a liquid or a solid. It is fluid, but also you can pack it into a snowball. And it's just weird to animate.
Yeah.
So a couple of really interesting things is they created one of their systems, Matterhorn, was a snow simulator software that was able to realistically show snow in a virtual environment. And they used it in like 70 plus scenes in the show. So if you're walking through the snow, what does it do? You know, if you're running through the snow, what does it do? And the animation team actually, you know, they went to Norway to like get inspiration for the culture and the what it looked like, but also they had some of their team go to, I want to say Wyoming. Yeah, Wyoming. Animators and special effects artists were sent to Wyoming to experiment with walking, running, and falling in deep snow with different attire.
Why didn't they come to Minnesota? We got plenty over here.
Oh, girl, not like in the mountains in Wyoming. Let me tell you, they were running up mountains in the woods, and you know, snow up to your hips and that kind of
So
stuff.
just imagine that, a whole bunch of animators running around in dresses in the snow.
I love it.
I want that job.
Me too. I can't draw, but I want to run around in a dress in the snow.
Kelly, you can draw us while we fall over in the snow in dresses.
Oh!
Great. Let's do that.
Coming soon to Fanimated.
I'll put it on the Patreon. Okay.
And Kelly, I would kind of love to, as someone who knows more about the animation, I would love to kind of tell you some of the scenes that I thought were really interesting, and then maybe hear your perspective on how those were animated or what you think is kind of cool about that section. Sure. So particularly the scene that stands out to me as just wow, because of the amount of locations and everything that's happening is during Kate knows this, I'm really bad with the names of songs and people, but it's when Anna and Hans are like getting engaged.
Love is an open door.
Love is an open door.
The number of locations and the way that song so beautifully, it's creating a storyline, but it's really creating a sense of place. They're all over the castle. They're at the lighthouse. The lighthouse projection particularly, I thought was a really special scene, and it was animated so beautifully. The waterfall in that scene, the intricacy on there's a scene with doors in that song.
Yeah,
the doors. Oh my gosh. Just the wood grain on the doors, the attention to detail, and that it makes you feel, and that's just the animation in general, that it's so realistic, but it was the strong use of that realistic animation to create such a world for this story to happen in, and how smartly they used a song that drove storyline to also create a sense of place using animation.
Yes, absolutely. And you think about it, aside from the first time in forever, this is our first look, and Anna's first look, kind of, into like being out in the world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And two things to add to how beautiful they are. Well, like three, I guess. But I would agree, yes, like every time you're in a new place, they are building, painting, designing a whole new set. So yes, that is an incredible amount of work, just for all the different locales. Then again, like you said, all of the different lighting effects for every single different location. Waterfall, it's like blues, and it's like they're lit by the moon, and then they're in a stable and it's warm tones. And lastly, the amount of detail is wonderful. And one of my favorite parts about the detail is actually like the costumes, how they move.
The costumes are great.
And how detailed they are. They actually had a specific costumer that they hired, Jean Gilmore. And so she was meshing 1850s Western European silhouettes with the details of traditional folk costumes of the 19th century in Norway. And she would even go to different animation departments. She would be running around dropping off samples of different things so that they could get textures right, and stitching, even how things were stitched like correctly. Like, of course, the kingdom of Arendelle is not a real place, but it's heavily influenced by Norway. They went to Norway, and that's where they're getting all these inspirations from for all these locales that they're in during that song. And they're right at the beginning treating it like a real place and showing the viewer, this is what Arendelle is. And it makes you feel like you're somewhere real.
I just loved the effect of Arendelle freezing over, particularly the ocean freezing. That was something that watching it again with like pay attention to the animation perspective was particularly dazzling to me, because I consider both of those mediums, and I know just from talking with you, to be really difficult to animate. Like water is really hard to animate.
Yes.
And ice and snow is really hard to animate. And so now you are animating something that's really difficult turning into another thing that's even as difficult. And I was like, how did this happen?
Right. Obviously, super awesome special effects teams make things happen. But yeah, you're correct. Like water, and really the thing about water is like making things look damp and wet. It's really hard. I really like that scene as well. And the thing about it is going over every single piece of architecture, and every single, hill is turning to ice, or turning to snow. And what I like the most, honestly, is like when they're coming back to Arendelle, and every time you come back to Arendelle, it looks worse and worse. And suddenly it's just huge snow drifts and everything else getting stuck. But yeah, the frozen fjord, it leaves an impact on the viewer, and it has to, because that's what they're fighting for the whole time, other than the like character development parts that they're fighting for, but also like the surface layer risks and the surface layer stakes are that Arendelle is frozen.
Well, and it kind of, because one of the things I like doing this podcast with you, Kelly, is I learn things, and I try to remember the things I learned when I'm watching another movie that we're going to talk about. And just one of the things, and I have no idea if this is even like pertinent but as a viewer, after our conversation about animating the wildebeest in The Lion King, and just how do you make something look random without it being random? Does that make sense?
Yes.
That was the same thing as that when you watch everything freeze for the first time, when her steps go out in little spikes from her feet. So how do you animate this so that it looks very jagged and randomly happening, but it's clearly happening, they're making it happen, but like how difficult is that not to just send like a shockwave effect over the entire thing, but to have these little creeps and crawls and different levels of freezing and different paces of freezing all throughout the entire scene without it just looking like, you know, like putting a gel over a light, you know, like, oh, now it's becoming night, you know, which can so easily happen. That was the part for me that after that conversation about the wildebeest, I was like, I know from talking about this with Kelly that that's really hard, and I can't believe how detailed this is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I'm kind of what you might have some more information kind of about kind of the technology and the system that they use, but like similarly applying that to the snowfall, like snow when rain and all that, it falls in random patterns. It's not just like sheets of snow coming down. So like kind of similarly to how do you make this random with the wildebeest, like how do you make it look like natural snowfall as opposed to just like, oh look, it's all coming down at the same pace at the same time. Kelly, you probably have an answer to that.
I'm dancing right now. I have an answer.
I hope you have an answer.
So again, just like with the Bewilderbeast and the Lion King, this is where computers are so
Gotta love them.
And like it's so fun to see how technology changes and how we can utilize the amazing tool of the computer to make these things happen. And that's what it is. They're developing all of these new tools and software systems to generate these realistic images and like making it look like it's not all just the same. They have a specific snowflake generator that created 2,000 different snowflakes for use.
Nice.
So 2,000 different snowflakes fallen.
That's a lot.
It is. It is a lot. So that's your answer, computers. And I have more stuff, but I want to hear your. So I want to hear your other.
One more.
That
one more generic. Yeah. Here's my generic. Just because, like, let's be real. It's Let It Go. It's the castle forming. That is like, it's the scene that just, that song brings the story together. I just feel like that was the scene where the animators just like mic dropped. Like it was like, let's just make this the best thing that we've ever animated in the history of animation. And then just like make it rain up in here and mic drop and just like leave because it's done, because that's the best thing that's ever happened.
Okay. Okay. I totally respect, obviously, so much respect for the animators, and like honestly, like it's beautiful. I am going to say something really controversial right now.
Kelly, controversy, what?
Oh my gosh.
I was disappointed in the ice castle. And here's
okay, I do want to know where she goes to the bathroom, but other than that, I thought it was very beautiful.
She's a person, she doesn't go to the bathroom.
It's cold. Good Lord.
I will say my favorite part about the ice castle is the lighting. Again, I don't know what it is about lighting. It just like gets to me. But the way that the, the light, from outside, and like you see the ice castle in so many different ways and colors, and it's beautiful. What I love about the song Let It Go from an animation standpoint is actually when the flurries like come from her hand, and when like the stairs are like frosty, and those kind of details are what I really love and appreciate. When the castle comes up from the ground, I just think it looks like plastic. That's just my opinion. And
I agree. Okay, and let me clarify, because maybe this will make you feel a little better. It's not just the castle, it's the scene. It's the scene in the entirety. Yes, the castle itself kind of like appears by magic, and that is one of the things that like leading up to that scene, the castle doesn't look great. It's the animation of her creating the castle. Not just the castle. It was the creation and her in there and the stuff flying out from her hands. and all that.
Also, I'm gonna make a character defense. This is her first time making an ice castle. The first time you do anything, it's gonna be bad. She's just discovering her magic powers for the first time. Okay, it can be a crappy castle for the first time. Just wait till Frozen 2. Her castle.
She was a classic first-time homeowner. She thought she needed like stairs and a really pretty chandelier. And stuff that like when Kate and I were talking about it, I'm like, if I had stairs made of ice, I would not have open back stairs. Like shit's gonna fall through those stairs. Like that's not you. No, you gotta put backs on those. So what if you get a puppy? The puppy will fall through the stairs. Your snow puppy will fall.
Also, I feel like she built her ice castle and then was like, I don't have any furniture. And I don't have an IKEA that's close to me. What am I gonna do?
Like I said, the bathroom, I mean, maybe you should have brought like at least like a wooden toilet seat. Cause I mean, if you're gonna sit down on like an ice toilet seat, it's gonna be real uncomfortable. I mean, Elsa.
Come on, girl.
What does she eat in her castle?
Nothing. That's how she fits in that dress.
She didn't think that far ahead.
No.
Ugh.
Oh, she didn't.
She eats her feelings, maybe. I don't know. She's kind of.
But you know what? That's kind of endearing. She's like all adults who are on their own for the first time. It's like, well, dang, what do I do now?
You can tell she's a princess who lived in a castle, and she's like, I'm by myself and free. And 3 days later, she's like, I don't have a toothbrush. Someone make me dinner.
She was locked in a room her whole childhood.
People just brought her stuff.
Yeah.
Probably like cleared her chamber pot away, and now she's up there just like, I'm free. And I'm like, maybe you should have brought a cook with you. So anyway, back to the fact that the castle looks like plastic.
It does. And if I probably wouldn't care that much if I wasn't such a big fan of Rise of the Guardians that came out the year before, 2012.
I never saw that one. There wasn't a princess in it.
Unfortunate, because the opening scene of that film has better ice and frost animation than anything in Frozen.
Oh no.
It just looks way better. I'm sorry, Disney, but it's just the truth. If you, I'm going to be talking about Rise of the Guardians at some point because, wow, it's one of my favorite films. And it's not just because, like, I'm a DreamWorks fanatic. That is probably partially why. But DreamWorks had better ice than Disney did.
That's very interesting. See, you can tell that I don't know anything about animation.
It just doesn't have any texture. You know, it's just like it just looks like plastic. It doesn't.
Maybe that's because she's just so good at making ice that her ice is so perfect. Like, it's not like jaggedy Viking ice. It's pristine, beautiful crystal ice.
Okay, sure.
You know when you go to the bar and you get like a really nice clear ice cube and you're like, how did this happen? She's like the high-end bartender of ice castle creation.
Great. And I will say that the Frozen 2 trailer, just from that alone, I'm like, they've made leaps and strides. It's weird because now watching Frozen after watching all the trailers like on repeat, I'm like, wow, even since 2013, like things have changed so much.
Mm-hmm.
And it just keeps getting better. And speaking of the Ice Palace, 50 effects artists and lighting artists worked together on the technology to create one single shot in which Elsa built her ice palace. Its complexity required 30 hours to render each frame, with 4,000 computers rendering one frame at a time. So,
and according to Kelly, still not good enough.
Obviously, I have a huge respect for it, and it's definitely like a huge deal. I am just, it's in the detail, it's in the quality, not the quantity. Okay, for real, I have a few more things about animation if you'll indulge me.
We, of course, will indulge you.
Awesome. One of the most interesting tools that they designed that I found was called spaces, which allowed Olaf's deconstructible parts to be moved around and then rebuilt. So
that's cool.
So cute,
isn't it? Because I never really thought about that. Like, of course, Olaf just puts himself back together and it makes sense. But from like a computer animation standpoint, that shouldn't make sense at all, because he is one unit. He is one, rig, but he's not, And so they had to find a way to be able to put him back together. Another interesting animation tidbit is that Elsa's hair contains 420,000 computer-generated strands, while the average number of a real human being is only 100,000.
Also, there's no way her bun was that little and tight and then turned into that giant braid.
Right.
Kelly, as someone with a huge amount of hair, tell us, is that
true?
Realistic?
Well, I can make it look kind of smaller, but yeah.
Maybe that's why she was so like. Maybe that's why she was wound so tightly.
Yeah,
because her bun was too small.
A lot of the volume of her hair when it's down in a braid comes from her like bangs or whatever. But I will say that it's definitely like a completely different model. Like it cannot be the same thing. Like it doesn't make sense.
Right. I think it's really interesting because there was this both in Disney and in DreamWorks in terms of storytelling, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about the story line of Frozen after this comment. I feel like there was this big lull between Disney Renaissance and now this group of films that those of us who kind of grew up Disney Renaissance are really connecting to as adults and are really, really loving. Not that there wasn't stuff in the middle that we didn't relate to. But
like Home on the Range, really?
Well, and even, some of the Pixar stuff was all really good, but I just feel like it's become very clear that the people who were impacted by Disney Renaissance are now making movies. That there was this little part where there was a group of people making movies that didn't know how to relate to the people who wanted to consume them in terms of how to create storyline. They drove the art forward, right? They developed all of these technologies that created all of this beautiful animation, but they were missing why things were being animated, to further a story. They were missing the storyline. They had the technology and they were developing all these beautiful ways to tell stories, but they didn't know which stories to tell. And I think that is a piece that like clearly DreamWorks came into. And I do think that How to Train Your Dragon was a turning point for them in terms of story content and story content and animation. And I think Disney experienced the same thing. And here goes feminist Laura. I think that for a while we had a bunch of grown up, kind of baby boomer men making Pixar movies that none of us understood, really. We liked them, but they just their storylines were hugely topical. Their animation was really cool, but like, why am I watching this movie? I don't want to watch it multiple times. And Frozen took everything that we learned from making those movies, all of the technology that was built, and they added back in the storytelling element that speaks to us and clearly also speaks to younger children. And I can't help but think that has to do with people who loved those movies as children now having a hand in making the movies.
Oh, absolutely. I think that there's always a cycle of that. And I mean, I see it even in like television animation too. It's just like continuously this circle of people now working that were influenced by something, and then they're creating something that will then influence the next generation of people, and it continues to build upon itself. And that's why I love the history of animation, the story of animation, and how like it's such a group effort. It's a cultural thing where everyone's building upon the works of everyone else, and we're creating more and more and building upon what we already know. And Frozen is an excellent example because they are taking the classic Disney formula, but they're changing it, and they're saying it's not true love's kiss, it's an act of true love, and that can be familial of love, not just romantic love.
Yes, let's talk about the story and the characters.
The relationship between Elsa and Anna, like having them be sisters, which obviously is like the big change in the film. What makes it so different is that it's about sisters and not about romantic partners. I mean, look at any other animated film. Disney's Lilo and Stitch is literally the only thing I can think of that is focused specifically on sisters. It's really interesting what Disney did. Well, that they accepted the idea and they went for it. One of my favorite little tidbits is that they did what's called a sister summit, at which the women from all over Disney Animation Studios were who grew up with sisters were asked to discuss their relationship with their sisters. So like even like, they're doing a lot of work just to research, what a relationship between sisters is like. And that they had Jennifer Lee writing and directing it, and actually having a voice coming and speaking life into these characters.
Yeah, that's such an important thing that I get excited to see more women, and I feel like it really should have happened sooner, but it's exciting to see women in that position finally getting to tell their stories. And like there's for so long it's just been men telling women's stories, and I feel like if you go back and watch certain like movies or TV shows that are centered around a female character, I feel like there's a lot of like art that you're like, oh, a man definitely directed this or wrote this and like somehow thought he was telling this honest voice of a woman, when really that's not what the experience is like at all. So that like and like a lot of things, we've got a long way to go, but that, I mean, just having her at the center of this movie, and like you can tell that so much thought was put into the relationship between Elsa and Anna and making it a genuine relationship, and it's just I love it. It's so good.
Yeah,
that's my favorite part of this movie, is just like seeing that relationship and the fact that they're basically strangers to each other at the beginning of the movie, and just kind of watching that relationship develop. It's so much more satisfying than just watching another romantic relationship. And obviously there's elements of that in the film that get twisted a little bit, but it's so refreshing, and it's nice to be able to see that represented on screen.
One of the things that I loved about that relationship, and that it was at the center, and something that you might not be expecting me to say, is I think that one of the things that made that really successful is that, yes, they were girls and there were aspects of like sister that you're not going to feel with other siblings, but the fact that it was a familial relationship, I think, was very relatable to a lot of people, and the way that her familial relationship affected the other relationships in her life. The role that having a sibling that you were close to that you're not close to anymore played in her life. Losing parents played a big role, in just her her need for connection with other people and where she goes to seek that. And it makes you like, not even necessarily Anna, but it makes you like examine being both of those people in your own life, right? Being the person who needs love, but also being the person who maybe doesn't give enough, that hopefully Elsa does see that, right? That she sees, maybe the things that my sister is doing or the way that she is, you know, it's my job as her sister and as her family member to also give love to her, and that really affected her relationship. And I don't know, I'm talking in a circle, but I love that it was about two sisters. I think it was really special also that they decided not to go full rage. This isn't about love, but to have a bad romantic relationship and a good romantic relationship and a familial relationship and a sister relationship, that it was like all very interconnected, and they weren't really necessarily putting one above the other. I think was really, really effective. And it was one of the things that made the story relatable for so many people.
Absolutely. I agree. And the story really is about Anna and Elsa, and Anna, all these things that happened to her as well, and her learning really what love is. And Elsa as well, like learning to love herself and learning like that she needs other people around her to be able to keep herself from the fear that she's feeling.
And that was, you know, it's interesting that the father character is the one who originally puts that feeling in her head as a child, that you're not going to feel anything. You know, conceal, don't feel, hide it, hide your feelings, right? Hide your feelings. Don't let them out. Don't let people see. That's how you can control it, is by not having any feelings at all. And I think that's, first of all, that's a very male, and that's a very built into the fabric of our society in general, right? Is the stoic, no feeling. It's something that guys don't like about women. They don't like that they're emotional. Like there's that little layer right there too. Like, you have to be strong. We don't want you to hide your emotions, and that's how you can control yourself. And that's very, especially, it's like, it's funny that it's set in Norway, because I feel like that's a very like Scandinavian male kind of thing too.
I feel like I can, being Scandinavian, I can speak to that and say yes.
Yeah, I'm German, and that's like the strong German, you know, no feeling male. And to have him tell her that, and then you know, her struggling. And that's just kind of, it's funny because I think of, you know, any little child learning to deal with their emotions. You know, how do you even explain to a child how to control their emotions? And there's that piece too of that. It's like, okay, you need to control it. Don't let these bad feelings out. Seems like a really good piece of advice. And then look what it turns into, you know, and that's, I think, super relatable as a parent too, right? You've got a child who's really struggling. Maybe they're very angry. Maybe they're a child who, you know, has trouble controlling their physicality and hits people. You know, how do you help control that in a healthy way? And that's like all these interesting questions that were like touched on in this very kind of, again, like I said at the very beginning, this very simple story arc, but all these little pieces that go into it. I mean, at the end, not to jump right to the end, but that's the strongest piece of the story, right? It's what melts Elsa's heart, going back to the, you know, the original story of the Ice Queen. That act of love is what melts the ice and the Snow Queen's heart. And that, you know, there's Kristoff, who Anna has just realized, oh my gosh, Kristoff loves me, right? And then she sacrifices herself for her sister because she loves her sister more.
Yes, that is exactly it. Like Anna is able to not only by the end of the film understand what love is, but be able to, you know, have the maturity enough and like being willing to sacrifice herself for her sister.
I was just going to say, one of the added pieces of that I think kind of gets lost if you're not thinking about it is one of the statements I think that's being made is that one of the big differences between Elsa and Anna, you know, Elsa has tried to run away from her mistakes. She tries to run away from Arendelle. She tries to run away from everything. You know, I'm just going to run away and it's not my fault. And yes, what Anna does at the end is a sacrifice for her sister because she loves her. But Anna is also taking responsibility for what is happening. What is happening is Hans's fault, and Hans is there because Anna brought him into the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so she is saying, I have this opportunity to, go get Kristoff and we'll kiss and it'll all be fine. But I not only am going to save my sister, I'm also going to save her by recognizing that I am the person responsible for what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I love how that whole final kind of act of the movie plays out. I think the order in which it kind of plays out with the various reveals of everything kind of amidst the storm building just creates such, like, by the time she jumps in front of Elsa, you're just like on the edge of your seat, like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? And like and especially like even in the beginning, the way that with like Love is an Open Door, the way that they establish the relationship with Hans, like if you rewatch it, you can kind of see those little elements in it, but when you watch it for the first time, you're like, oh my, what? Like, how did this happen? It's such a good reveal. That scene is so perfect. Every time I watch it, I'm just like, oh no, Hans.
Let's talk about the Hans reveal, because I just thought that was some of the best Disney storyline twist that
Absolutely.
I had seen. I mean, like the theater, there was an audible gasp in the theater when he is like, turns out to be bad.
Oh, and I was if only someone
sorry, spoilers if you haven't seen Frozen. Hans isn't a good person. But the funniest, so this is a stupid story, but the funniest thing for me, the reason I was extra upset is because I loved that Hans had red hair. My last name is Wacker-Hansen. My husband's last name is Hansen, son of Hans. He's Danish, and he has red hair, and Hans looks like my husband. So I'm like, oh my God, my husband is a Disney prince. I can't believe it. I'm married to Hans, the Frozen prince. And then when he was bad, I was like, no! That's my husband! So I was super sad.
No,
because it not only was just so well set up that honestly you were not expecting it at all, but then for me it was the extra layer of my husband isn't a Disney prince.
I feel like Frozen happened, and then there was a series of Disney movies where the same thing kind of happened, like Wreck-It Ralph, where you're like, oh, this guy is good, and then he like turns out to be a villain. Sorry, spoiling Wreck-It Ralph if you haven't seen it. So, and I'm sure we'll talk about it eventually. Inside Out, I thought Bing Bong was going to be a villain because it was like in a line of all these Disney movies where, oh, this like random like nice character turns out to be bad, and so.
How can you think Bing Bong was bad?
That was just what I thought. I was like, oh, he's gonna turn out to be a bad guy. I don't know how.
Because he had bad guy voice.
Oh, maybe. And then it just like ripped my heart out of that. I stopped. Okay, Kelly, go.
First off, going way back. Yes, I love how all of this is building when the storm is raging, and then when Anna turns to ice and Elsa realizes it, everything freezes. Like everything, like the snow is just stuck in the air. Like everything is quiet and still. Beautiful scene. Okay. Second, again, going back to what I said at the beginning about me being very obsessed with this film, there's something very unfortunate that happened.
Did you ruin it?
It got spoiled for you? How?
So there were several storybooks that were in production and then released for the film. And some pages of that, one of those storybooks got leaked into the internet. And they just so happened to show the true nature of Hans. So
how disappointing.
So I knew Hans was the villain from the start because I got it ruined by the depths of the internet. And it's all my fault. I have no one to blame but myself.
No wonder you were so disappointed when you saw the movie.
I know. I really wish that I could have seen it not knowing about Hans. And I'm sure it would have changed my perspective on the film And that's why here, I'm just going to say it right now, folks. Like, I want you to be excited for films, but don't go crazy, because the poor people out there, and like, you know, even if you know something, don't force it on other people. And also, like, just do yourself a favor and be patient. Be patient. I wasn't patient, and I got the biggest animated film of the century like spoiled for me.
That's so because one of the best parts about it is, right, you love Kristoff so much, but you're like, but Hans is still bad. Like, I just was so, it was like Twilight. I was Team Hans, right? I was just Team Hans the whole way until he went bad. And then you're like, go get Kristoff, go get him, go get the other one. It's just the sexual tension is building. And it was just, yeah. Oh, Kristoff. You guys want to talk about Kristoff real quick? Actually, I have a theory that Kate laughed at, so I now say that it's our theory. So one of the things that I really loved about this movie was I felt like it was voice cast very well.
Yes.
I think Kate feels like a lot of the voices were very recognizable to her.
Yes. Can I interject on that front?
Yes.
Particularly Idina Menzel, because obviously as a theater fan, I like worshipped Wicked forever and ever. And I have a hard time watching Frozen and disconnecting Idina from my, like, it's, I have a hard time going, oh, that's Elsa, because I'm thinking, oh, it's Idina Menzel. Like, this voice that I've grown up just like in my head all the time. So like listening to Let It Go and like even listening to her speak, it's a little hard for me to separate that. And Jonathan Groff a little bit too. And I don't know why Kristen Bell, that's not the case. I fully believe Kristen Bell. I think I think as Anna, she gives one of the best voice performances in a film.
So I have to say, for listeners out there, when Kate says she's a theater person, I mean, Kate is only, like, she Broadway bullies me all the time, because I know you do, because you know the name of everyone who has ever gotten up on a stage on Broadway and done a little ditty, and like, you're like, that's this person, and they were in this show at this year and this time, and I know the soundtrack. You want me to sing it for you right now? And I love that about you. But the reason I think the voice casting was great is because I am not a crazy person. I did not know the voices that well. I also really love that they cast musical actors as the voices.
Yes.
That is something that's really important to me.
Yeah, I will take, you know, a voice that maybe is very well known for being, you know, for being in Wicked or for being, you know, in another show. I will take that over either a celebrity who can't singing, aka all of the Disney live action remakes, or, you know, even dubbing sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, I complain about that like every movie musical I ever watch. I'm like, why?
Okay, so I'm just here for all the fun facts, right? So Idina Menzel originally auditioned for Tangled, and
I knew that. Sorry.
Yeah, she obviously didn't get the part, but they did immediately call her when they were working on Frozen. Also, none of the songs were done when Belle and Menzel got cast. So they really did keep their voices in mind when they were writing the songs. Like, they did. When they first did a table read together, they sang "The Wind Beneath My Wings" duet.
Cute! Oh my gosh, that's adorable.
And when they sang in harmony, everyone was like, "Yep, we're keeping those two. Those two are our sisters."
Oh my god, I love it.
The rest is history.
Speaking of voices, the reason we went on this tangent is that so Jonathan Groff voices Kristoff, and for those of you listening who don't know, Jonathan Groff is a very attractive man, and he has a very, I think, attractive voice.
Yes.
So he has a very like win you over kind of voice, which is kind of funny. And Kate and I, when we were watching, Kate mentioned, she's like, I hope in Frozen 2 that Kristoff gets to sing. So we get to hear Jonathan Groff sing a whole song that isn't him doing a reindeer voice.
Yes.
And I said to her, I'm like, I think they almost had to, because he has such a sexy voice. Like Hans was supposed to be kind of the sexy guy, right? And then Kristoff was kind of like the bumbling Iceman, even just in the way they're animated. And so I'm like, it just wouldn't have, they're like, okay, he's too sexy. We got to like pretend you're the reindeer for a minute and like just make yourself a little weird. Like you got to be weird because you're too sexy right now.
Oh dear.
It's true.
That's what I have to say about poor Kristoff. I love his blonde hair. That's all. And his reindeer. Let's talk about the friends.
I do hope that he gets to sing more.
Let me get my notes about Olaf, because Olaf is the purest sidekick that they have ever had.
Sweet.
Good. Okay? Tell me about it. Because obviously a lot of people like him. Let me just like really quick while you're pulling that up. I just feel like with Olaf, with the trolls, with, everything, I just feel like, and the history proves this, because, I mean, they didn't have their stuff together until 5 months before the movie was supposed to release. And they were changing things like every which way. They had so many ideas and so many concepts that they had too many. They didn't edit it down enough. And that is why I don't like the trolls and I don't like Olaf, because they're just too many things. Olaf was originally written as an evil snowman when Elsa was evil. That's where Olaf is coming from, and they just kept the snowman, and they didn't need to. Continue. Tell me why Olaf is awesome.
Can I go first, Laura?
Yes.
Okay. So I agree with the trolls. I do not think the trolls are necessary. They needed somehow to establish this prophecy. And I realized that they wanted to connect Kristoff to this prophecy so that it could kind of come full circle in a way, that they could like bring her to but like the gospel song is so out of place. Okay. It doesn't make sense.
Yes.
Why is Kristoff there as a child? Why did this
okay, yes. Chris, I have written right here, right under, okay. Those of you who are just listening to this, I'm pointing my notes out on the camera. So right under, and I'm not saying that Sven isn't great. When I was saying Sven didn't need to be there, because my third note is baby Sven is everything.
Yes,
I agree. Baby Sven,
so cute.
Baby Sven is everything. But under that, I have Kristoff's backstory is weak. I do not understand. I love. Okay, so he's in the opening ice scene, which one of the things with the music.
That didn't need to be there. It didn't need to be that scene.
It didn't need to be there, but what I told Kate last night was that I really think when you look at the lyrics, there is a lot of storytelling happening in the lyrics, and I really appreciate that that's a big part of Norse tradition, and about the Norse choral tradition is storytelling through song. And there's a lot of symbolism of thaw the frozen heart and cut through the ice, and that song is setting up the story. And it's the idea that I thought that it paid homage to the fact that this story was based on a very traditional folktale, and that they were kind of telling the folktale version of the story, and then we're going to see a new telling of the story. Did it need to be there? No. I really liked that little touch, and I really loved the use of traditional Scandinavian, like Lutheranism choral singing. But Kristoff did not need to be there. Why was he there? Because baby Sven is cute. Why they needed a wise old character to tell the story. I'm not sure why very misplaced and bizarrely animated trolls. Like, obviously,
then waste our time with a whole song about
just a huge waste. And I can understand the want for trolls, because we are in the land of Beowulf and Grendel, right? We are in the land of this, like the mountain troll is a very, very big piece of Norse mythology. But I just felt like they went way too cutesy, and they're Kristoff's family.
Yeah,
like,
it's so
why
bizarre.
is he just running around the woods with ice? Like, why didn't any of those dudes care about him? Like, why wasn't one of his dad one of the ice people? Like, why is his baby reindeer still there?
How does
Why
he
is his
have a
reindeer still
vocation as an
alive?
adult
Is it
if he
with
was
the
raised
dead?
by trolls? I don't understand.
When I first saw the film, and I saw at the very beginning Kristoff and Sven follow the king and queen and watch, what unfolds between them and the trolls. I was sitting there the whole film waiting for the payoff that he knew something, that he was involved with something, that he was part of something bigger. And the payoff was, this is my family, the love experts. It didn't pay off.
The love experts.
I know.
It's
Like,
so bad.
It is not good.
It was to bring them to them so that they could tell them that she needed an act of true love. Like, I'm just saying, from a writing standpoint, it could have come from something else that was better than whatever. And because they set it up at the beginning that Kristoff was there, I kept waiting for there to be like a realization or a connection, like, oh, Anna, you're the person that I saw, and like, whatever. And like, he even has a line like, oh, I've seen them do this before. Like, he remembers, but does he not acknowledge that it was Anna? It was them. Like, I just kept waiting for him to be a bigger part of this story.
And there could have so easily been, and I know they didn't want to push the love angle too long, but it would have been such a great juxtaposition against her very quick relationship with Hans, to have this guy who has known her for her whole life. He lives in Arendelle, right? This is someone who has known her for her whole life, even though she doesn't know it. I think that could have been really, really cool. And you're very right. It just, poor Kristoff. I love him as a character, but Kristoff and Sven are just drastically underdeveloped as characters. Who is not underdeveloped as a character because he needs no depth, because he's a snowman, is Olaf.
He literally has no depth.
So I thought that Olaf was everything that has ever been good about a Disney sidekick.
I agree.
Rolled into a new
literally
Disney
rolled
sidekick.
into
Literally rolled into it. So I loved that he was so innocent and childlike, and the delivery of his lines and the way that his lines were written into the script. I absolutely love when lines that are comic relief or are really funny help, like when it's not just someone trying to be funny. And the fact that he just the things that he would say,
it's so cute.
Towards the end, when he'd be like, let's go kiss Hans. He just announced it. And then when they're like, stay out of sight, Olaf, okay, hello, and he goes and sees the people. Or he'll say the best. Okay, I watched this movie. My best friend Michelle had never seen Frozen, and we watched it. I went to grad school with her. So when it came out on when it came out on DVD, we got it and we watched it. And she had never seen it, and she was watching it with me for the first time. And first of all, the girl is Southern, so she was like, I don't understand any of this Scandinavian culture. What's happening? And then it was the moment that Sven, when they've fallen off of the cliff, and not Sven, when they've fallen off of the cliff, and Olaf is just looking up at the camera, and he's like, I don't have a skull or bones. Michelle fell off her chair. She peed her pants laughing. It was so well placed and so well delivered. And to harken back to the animation, he was animated so beautifully to match his emotions and to deliver those lines. It just, everything about him was so sincere. And then on top of all the topical, and Kate, I'll let you talk about this. This might be what you're raising your hand about, that suddenly, the cutest line in the entire and like most meaningful line in the entire show is an Olaf line when he's trying to warm her up.
Because he's so pure, right. And he just like instinctively understands that because he's a snowman. He's never had any problems in his life. He falls off a cliff and it just comes back together. And he literally is that purity, and that like he's just so, he represents like love itself, that he is like, some people are worth melting for. And it's like he delivers like one of the most important lines in the movie. Also, I feel like Olaf is like a less sassy version of Donkey from Shrek. Yes. He's just the one, he's like the one who delivers those like, wow, this line came out of nowhere and I'm laughing really hard. Like I mean, isn't there in Shrek, he's like, I don't have any toes. Like, it's just like,
my feet, I can't feel my legs. And he's like, oh, they're not my legs. And on top of that, like, I want to be, and it's interesting, Kelly, that you said that, like, originally he was this evil snowman, because I wish that I had been in the story development session where someone blurts out, what if he's a snowman who really wants to know what summer's like?
The lyrics in that song are some of the most I love those lyrics.
I would agree.
Like,
I think that song is
put me in summer and I'll be
a
happy snowman. And just the first time I heard that song, I was just like doubled over. It's so funny. And Bobby Lopez, just like, I mean, his MO is just like writing the most clever, most crass lyrics. Like, that's what his career is centered around. And then he just kind of ships it for kids, and I love it.
So one of the things, and it's interesting, Kelly, because you just said that you felt like completely unneeded, right? But I think that when we look back at the Disney formula and the remembering that Disney is for children, and I'm 29 years old, so I may think that I wanted more adult depth to my characters like Kristoff, and that I wanted more elaborate backstories. And then I remember that my niece was 4 when we saw this, and she thought Olaf was the best thing that she had ever seen. And so those little interjections of the side characters and the very unneeded topical fun elements, and like, I don't like the trolls. My little nieces and nephews adored the trolls. They thought they were so fun. We had little gnomes all over the yard at my in-laws' house, and they like had all the names of like Papa Troll, and like they loved the trolls. And so that's the part that I have to remember too, that I'm critiquing it as an adult who still loves animation and movies. But those pieces stayed in there, and those are pieces that children, who that's ultimately what Disney is for. The beauty of Disney is that they make children's movies that are also extremely appealing to adults, and that's why they make so much money. And those pieces that maybe we didn't like, the kids love them so much.
And again, when I first saw this movie, I mean, again, I was already so drenched and marinating in this story that like, it's just, I didn't come at it with that childlike wonder that I guess I, and even since then have, like been aware of. And because of that, like, so these are definitely all critiques I like still have, but again, it just like takes time for me to like be able to see it again in a new light, instead of the light of, and I think it makes a really big difference where you're at when you walk into a story, no matter what medium it is. Like a song, a book, a TV series is going to affect everyone differently. And it's about that one thing that comes into your life at just the right time. And this is just one of those things that came at the wrong time for me.
I said I was going to feminist rage, and I didn't for any reason. Because I actually thought this was a triumph of female storytelling. So
yeah, I would say, as far as that goes, like, I would agree. And I think that it's like, again, like there's just so much more to be done. And like it's a good stepping stone, like deeper, because Jennifer Lee was the first female director of a Disney feature-length animated film, co-director with Chris Buck. And now she's the chief creative officer of Disney Animation. So we can only assume that things are going to get better and better from here. And they already are. Like we just got announcements of 4 directors for upcoming Disney films, and 2 of them are women. So we're getting there.
That's amazing. The one thing that I will say, if I had one critique from sort of the female lens for this movie, was that I wish that the body sizes of the 2 female leads were more realistic. We went for a really realistic storyline, and I actually think that they got there a little bit more with Moana. I really believe she looked like a teenage girl.
Yeah.
She looked like a very healthy, thin teenage girl. But I did think that Anna and Elsa had sort of that very traditional Barbie doll body with the really big head and the teeny tiny waist and the little pointed feet. And for some reason, Elsa wears heels for the whole movie. And I'm like, you're an animated character. Why are you wearing high heel shoes? And so that is like the one wish that I had, because I did think I really loved that the body shape between Kristoff and Hans was very different.
Yeah.
And I wish that there had been, and overall there were all different sizes and shapes in the general cast of extra characters. I just wish that one of the main girls had been a little bit more realistically animated.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Absolutely. And I hope that we get more varied female designs in the future. And that's been a constant problem, like in general. Like I feel like females are not animated as diversely. Okay, the sequel is coming next month. We've seen some really great trailers and they look phenomenal. What is one thing you really, really want to see it happen in the sequel? What I want is, besides more of Kristoff singing, is an explanation of where Anna and Elsa's parents were going when they were on the boat. I
feel like we're gonna get that. I'm excited to see even more of like an expanding world. Like there's more kind of like a woodsy environment. She's at like a shoreline, which I'm assuming is somewhere in Arendelle, but it's kind of cool to see a more like expanding world.
Absolutely.
In that regard.
I am really hoping that they so they drew on, one sort of Hans Christian Andersen story, but they used so much Norse influence, and I feel like this will hopefully happen based on what I've seen from the trailer. I am just a huge consumer of Norse mythology. Like anytime, I love anything about the Vikings. I've seen like every, even just bad TV show, any documentary, tons of reading. I love Norse mythology. Kate can tell you, I want to name my firstborn child Thor. Like I just love Norse mythology. And so I'm hoping that they draw upon some of that as the influence for the storyline. Because I just don't think you can get any more eerie or kind of cool or mysterious. There's almost, in my opinion, Norse mythology has the most intrigue built into it, kind of out of all of the traditional places that you could draw storyline from. And they did such a great job of integrating Norse influence into the first movie that I would love to see it take a little bit more of a mysterious turn. And I'd love to see the story have grown with, it's been many years since the first one came out, and the little girls who were watching it as children are a little older now. So I'd love to see the show and the storyline grow with the audience.
I love that. And I agree. Those are wonderful. So excited for Frozen 2. In the meantime, what have you been watching recently?
We just watched Aladdin.
Finally.
And finally, right? And I loved it.
I loved it as well.
I didn't really know going into it that I was gonna love it, and I loved it enough. I just bought it for myself for my birthday.
I thought it was very enjoyable. Not my favorite remake, but not the worst.
Yeah.
I thought that it was one of the better ones that I had seen. I think that one of the things that made it successful is they kept it very dreamy, the way that the Cinderella remake was very dream world.
Yes, and that's the best remake that they've made. Was Cinderella.
Yes, absolutely. And it was very like Arabian fantasy, with lots of different Middle Eastern influences in it. I felt like the whole thing was just such a celebration, which is what I want those remakes to be. It was a celebration of the story. Oh, and the carpet animation was just top notch.
Yeah, it was really good.
Absolutely, 100%.
I did miss Gilbert Gottfried as Iago. I was a little upset that Iago was evil and not Gilbert Gottfried.
So we fixed that by just intermittently going Cave of Wonders like over and over while we were watching.
Good.
We also just watched Prince of Egypt because of your podcast that just came out like last week or
go.
And Laura had never seen it before.
I had never seen Prince of Egypt before.
I'm glad that I got to watch that with her. It's so good. I love that movie.
I've also been working on some of the music and some voice lessons, and so I just thought that it was time to watch it. And we actually watched it the same day as we watched Anastasia. So let me say things that I think actually are pertinent to both of these. I think that these were movies that were written by adults who didn't understand what is appropriate for children in terms of humor and content. So I thoroughly enjoyed them as an adult, but I think what I enjoyed the most was the music.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, also, Puka is the best character ever in the history of characters.
It's true.
Puka is the best. Fergus, my dog, is basically Puka.
He is.
It's true. Also, about Anastasia, just putting a plug in there for Patreon. Right now, this month, October, you can vote for our poll, which this month's theme is not a Disney princess. You can choose from Anastasia, Princess Mononoke, The Stolen Princess, and The Swan Princess. All you have to do is go on The Swan Princess! You gotta let me tell them the website. Patreon.com/Fanimated. Become a Patreon. You can change or edit or delete your Patreon pledge at any time, and $1 a month gets you the privilege to vote on our episode topics. So there you go. Go for it.
Patreons, you have to vote for the Swan Princess. You do not understand how deeply I love that effed up movie. You don't understand. I apologize. I shouldn't have used that language. It's a weird movie.
Are you crying, Laura?
I'm going to cry. I just love it so much.
You heard it from Laura here, folks. Make her dreams come true and vote for the song.
I mean, we stan Anastasia. Let's be real.
Well,
I don't know why we have to hold up the microphones when we say this.
It's very dramatic.
Currently, Anastasia is winning, so get your votes.
Yes!
Okay, cool. That's it.
Cool.
Thanks so much for listening. Remember, if you'd like to hear more about what Laura, Kate, and I have to say on the film, go to www.patreon.com/Fanimated for a special bonus episode. Let us know your thoughts about Frozen and your other favorite animated media on Facebook and Instagram at Fanimated Podcast. You can also email us at fanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. The art for this podcast is done by me. You can find me on Instagram at CandorDraw. The music is provided by Purple Planet Music, and a huge thank you to Laura and Kate for joining me today. We will talk at you in a couple of weeks, but in the meantime, stay tuned and stay animated.
I love Idina Menzel. I know she's kind of controversial to some people, but I love her.
Again, Broadway. I mean, what on earth? Kate, Idina Menzel is not controversial.
Some people don't like her voice, okay? That's what I mean by controversial.
Well, they can all just like deal with it because she sang the most popular song of 2000.
Two of the most popular songs of the 21st century.
I don't like her voice. Well, she can sit on her giant pile of money and laugh all the way to the bank. And you in your house in suburban Minnesota, aka me, whenever I criticize anyone, driving my tiny car and actually working a real job, they can just laugh the whole way to the bank.